Welcome to Chasing the Beats, a show dedicated to weeklybeats.com artists, their songs, and stories from the 2024 season. I'm your host, SQF. And on today's show, our guest is That Ranjit. So, welcome for our second installment. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so before we actually hit record, we were talking a little bit about Weekly Beats process and kind of the difference, I guess, between our last guest, JWH, and yourself. I think there's, I was kind of thinking about this like someone that is like primarily an artist that writes lyrics, which I know you've done a little bit of, which I want to get into. But it's like a different approach to even how I make music, which for Weekly Beats was kind of like survival. Like I need to make some stuff.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, your process and inspirations that may not be quite the same as JWH's.
I just love that the term survival, like in terms of Weekly Beats, like there's this, like there is kind of a frantic energy that revolves around it, which I think can be really motivating too in a lot of ways, where which I think that was like a huge driver for me for like trying to follow through with Weekly Beats, where it's so quick, where it just forces you to like, it's like, I gotta just do something,
Yeah.
But what we were talking about earlier, like when I was thinking about or like listening to the previous episode with JWH and how like a lot of his music seems rooted in like personal subjective emotion, and like lyrics wise too, like pulling from like personal experiences that are like very tangible and relatable. And I think that's like really cool. But I think like I approached Weekly Beats, I get inspired just by like messing around with stuff in my room. And like, that's kind of where my little studio is. It's just a desk with like the gear I have. And it is kind of like, it's a nice ritual, and it is kind of like a therapy to be able to just like sit down and just like mess around with this synth, or like if I have had just like a beat in my head throughout the day, like I'll just keep thinking about it and like can't wait to get home and like actually start to sketch it out. But that's another thing I like love about the M8 too, is because like I do take it with me like quite a bit. So it's awesome to be able to just have that, and like if I have an idea, I just want to like get it out quickly, and then I can flesh it out more when I get back home.
Yeah, I love the M8.
It is, yeah, it's a truly amazing artwork.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of how I make music too, is just experimenting. Like if something's not flowing, I think that's another advantage to the M8 is like I can pick it up, try a couple things, be like, nothing's really clicking right now, and then other times I do that and I'm there for an hour.
Yeah, and it's like you just have all these projects that are loaded on there, and like you don't have to like commit to any single one of them. It's just like I'm gonna put this idea down and like save it in the bank, and then like let's get a new one, and then you have just like a ton of these ideas. And some of the songs that I made for Weekly Beats, I would just go and sift through all of the just like crap that I've made on the M8, and then it, like sometimes when you're sketching something out, you might not really see much in it, but then if you go back to it, approaching it with like a different state of mind or whatever, like sometimes there's like a little bit of a sparkle there that you can try to keep putting like the embers on, and then try to like grow it into like a nice big fire, and then it totally becomes something you didn't anticipate, which it's always really exciting with music. For me, like letting the process just kind of take you wherever it wants to go.
Yeah, I love finding hidden gems in the boneyard of projects.
Yeah, totally. And also like with the like firmware updates that Tim is rolling out, it's just like even something that's just like, hey, I like made the arpeggio function just like way sicker, and I was immediately just like, this is going to be such a game changer.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about your studio. I know just from reading your comments and stuff that you've got an SP404. What's kind of your standard experimental tools you use?
So yeah, the SP404 is it's like still, I would say, like a little bit newer to me, even though I've had it for maybe a few months now. Um, but also on my desk, I've got my like Yamaha mixer. I've got my Hydrasynth desktop. I
Mm,
use the Arturia Keystep 37 as my MIDI controller.
cool.
Um, the M8, of course. And I have had some other gear earlier, or last year, I should say, which I've like sold to get some of this other gear.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like, yeah, like thinking about like things that are inspirational, like I think gear, yeah, and like playing around. It's just like play. Like I love playing around with stuff and just like seeing what it sounds like and what I can make with it. And so I feel like when I first started like really getting into making music, I was like, I would try this thing out, and it's like if I didn't really resonate with it for like a long period of time, I would just try to sell it, get another piece of gear, and then like
Yeah.
if I really like that, I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna stick with this, and then
See if you
over
gel
time,
with
it's
it.
like, yeah, what else could I incorporate? It's just like I'm always like on the hunt for like the perfect little tool,
Yes.
which is also kind of like bad
A
for like my
danger.
bank account. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like every time I am thinking about purchasing something, I always am telling myself, like, I have to sell a piece of gear. So it's like, what am I willing to part with?
That
Because right
is that
now
is
I
a
have
very
a,
good policy.
yeah, like I have a, like a pretty good setup right now. But yeah, I'm always just like, ooh, but like, what about this other thing? It could be
Yeah,
like, it could be really sick.
there's always some cool stuff coming out.
Yeah. What's like the most like recent piece of gear that you've gotten?
Oh man, I actually just got a Digitone 2. I've never delved into the famed Electron flow
Yeah.
workflow. But it was new and I had a deluge for a long time and like an OG OP1, and I had just been so enthralled with the M8. I was like, to go back to the deluge, I was like, I feel like with all the community firmware updates and everything, like, I feel like I'm almost like relearning it.
Yeah.
And the longer I was away from it, the less I really liked the synth sounds. So I was like, I'm gonna sell that, just like you. I'm gonna sell a couple things to fund this other thing that is like, you know, in the weekly beats off season. Now that I'm not like so pressured to put out a song, I can kind of do a little bit more experimenting, not having to worry about like, all right, is this needs to start taking shape into like an arranged song soon because Sunday is approaching.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sick that you had the deluge though. That's like one of the pieces of gear that I was like reading about and like watching videos and like what's like the workflow like, because it seems like it can do a lot.
I mean, it can do a ton. And I mean, it is an amazing machine. And it was one of those machines that I was like, I'm never getting rid of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the original 7 segment. And then when the OLED came out, I bought the OLED so that I could send my 7 segment in to get the screen update so that I wouldn't be without one. That's how much I loved it at the time. Um, so it is amazing for just like more visually sequencing notes and sequencing external gear and recording back end and sampling. So kind of new to synthesizers when I first got it. Like I only had an OP1 at first.
Yeah. Did
And
you
I come
like
from
the,
a guitar background.
oh, okay. So was the
So
like tape workflow of the OP1 like good for you?
I liked it at first, like, because it kind of took me back to the old days of when I had a 4-track tape player, like an old Porta Studio. But after a while, it just got annoying,
Yeah.
like the cutting and pasting, and like it just became frustrating after a while. And then I was like, oh, this whole sequencing world where I can like change the notes after the fact and I don't have to do another take. I can just move the note.
Yeah.
That kind of like the deluge opened the door for like the whole sequencing, making music workflow. That was also not on a computer because that was another requirement.
Yeah. I had the OP one for a little bit too, and I kind of felt the same way. Like at first, yeah, it's like this really cool little thing. I was taking it with me everywhere. Like portability, I think for me is
Yeah.
like huge because like that's another. And I think the deluge is like
It's
internal
very
battery,
portable.
right? Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of got annoying after a little bit and like really tedious. And it was just, I felt like I had to put in just like so much work just to get a song that I thought was like good. And I was like, this is so much fucking work, man. And I also thought that just like the sounds on it after a while, I was just became really uninspiring. And I was like, this thing kind of sounds really dinky. And I need
Yeah.
something that really fills out space and makes me feel like I'm being covered with a like huge blanket of sound. And that thing just felt just like this tiny little box, you know?
Yeah, at first I liked the sounds, but then I think after being on the M8, I went back to the OP1 like maybe I can start sampling the OP1 into the M8, and the stuff I was making with the OP1 I was just like, I don't like any of this. Like this is probably a sign to sell this and roll it into something else.
Yeah, for sure. Using the like OP1 in conjunction with the M8, I was doing for a little bit, and I thought that that workflow was actually it was kind of cool because what I would do is just like audio out from the OP1 into the audio in on the M8. I would just set both at the same tempo, and then like
Yeah,
I really like to just like jam on keys. So it's like I'll just
me too.
have a beat playing on the M8 and then just like jam on the OP1, and then if I liked a little snippet of it, then I would like just sample that into the OP1. I also loved the FM radio. I was just like sampling
Yeah,
that and then
that
just
was
chopping it
fun.
up. Yeah, I've used that in a couple weekly beats tracks. Yeah, and that's another. Yeah, it's just like what there's so many sounds just going on in the world right now, and you're just tuning into this tiny frequency, and then if you just like sample 10 seconds and chop it up, there's like a whole world in that like this tiniest moment that exists.
Well, you are the chop master. So, how did you get into sample chopping?
How did I do that?
Was it on the M8 or?
I think that's when yeah, like really started to discover it and play around with it. I think before that, I was always trying to experiment with just like found sounds or like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to record my own clap or like my own whatever, my own little snare hit, and then try to use that instead of like a pre-programmed one or a sample of one. Um, and then slowly I just kind of started loving this idea of just like of sounds and then using sounds in music. And then I was like, oh well, like why don't I just start sampling stuff? And I think part of me thought that like using samples was like cheating at music or something, because it's like
Yeah,
if I'm
yeah.
using a sample, it's not like. But then I like it's just the same approach to me as like an artist does collage, where it's like there's so much stuff out there in the world, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
can cut it up and slice it up and like make your own composition with the stuff that already exists. And plus, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like if you're trying to do something that is like new or like avant-garde or like it's never been done before or whatever, it's like it's probably just going to be like noise music,
Yeah.
which like I'll never like listen to noise music, but I love going to noise shows because it's just a crazy experience.
Yeah, it's more about the experience than it is. It's like you're not going to listen to it driving to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think if you do that, then like I'll pray for you, I guess. Yeah, but then like getting the M8 and like realizing that it had sampling capabilities, I was like then still doing the same thing, but then getting down into like really more granular stuff, like just chopping little bits of sounds. And I was like, I was really inspired by like Boards of Canada and
Mm-hmm.
how they would use samples. They've been like one of my favorite bands for like like as long as I can remember. Um, so I just kind of like started adopting other approaches that I
Yeah.
was like listening to. And then I like even just like having that made, I really started to feel like I could make something feel like it's my own, or like that it came from me and I'm not just trying to one replicate what this other artist is doing. But
Yeah.
it's like I do have a lot of ideas in my head, and I just like want to try to get them out. And sometimes like hearing other things or sampling those things just like gets me to that idea a little bit quicker, you know?
Yeah. What is your musical background? Had you made music before Weekly Beats?
So I grew up playing the alto saxophone,
Okay.
actually. Um, and I started when I was like maybe in like third or fourth grade, and I played alto sax until the end of high school. And
All
then
right.
in like middle school, I had some friends that were in bands. And that was when like, you know, like the emo scene was like really starting to happen. And so I was into like a lot of like screamo, hardcore music, but I never like performed anything. I was still just like the band, like the super emo alto sax band kid, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but I do remember like, I think it was like freshman, sophomore year in high school. I just started like dinking around with my mom's like really old Yamaha digital piano, and I just really loved like I was like, oh, piano's like fun. It's like I like playing on these like little keys. Uh, and then somehow I got like super. I can't even remember like the first synthesizer like I ever saw, but I just
Mm.
immediately. I think maybe my friend got like a micro Korg, and I was like, this is insane. Like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen, you know? It had the
Yeah.
vocoder and everything. And I was
Oh
like, this
yeah.
is
Yeah.
like, this is so far ahead of its time. Um, so I think like he introduced me to just like the world of synthesizers. And I can't really remember like too much of the trajectory from there, but it's like I remember the first synth that I got myself was the Elasis Ion, which is a really cool synth. And then I feel like I was so young too, where like I saved up all my money and like I bought this synth, but like I could play around with it, but I really did not know at all like what I was
Yeah.
doing. You know, I was mostly just using it as like a preset machine and just like adjusting the
Uh-huh.
cutoff and being like, oh, this is
Yeah, here's
synthesis
my
right here.
sound.
Yeah. And actually, I think before that, or like what maybe led me into getting like an actual synthesizer was listening to like chiptune music. And I got really into like the chiptune scene and got LSDJ.
Okay.
And then so that seemed like a nice transition, like into the M8, you know, going like many, many years into the
Right.
future. But like LSDJ was sick. And I think I first started listening to chiptune because I was just so fond of like video game music. Like
Mm-hmm.
growing up, I loved playing video games, and I still do, but like something about this like older, it's like less cinematic than like some OSTs nowadays. It's just like there's like four tracks, they're all like sawtooth waves, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like they had the sickest melodies and rhythms. Like playing Mega Man, it's like, you know, this like saw wave is just like the sickest melody I've ever heard. And like how those composers are able to do so much with so
With so
little.
little, yeah.
Yeah, it's so impressive. And got really into chiptune music, and got like my old Game Boy and got like an LSDJ cart, and like spent so much time just like trying to like figure it out. Um, and I made like a lot of really, really cool stuff with it. And it was like kind of like when it first, I feel like, at least in my sort of community, started was like pretty fresh and new, and nobody was really like doing that. So it's like I had like a MySpace account and like would post like my music on there, and it got like like it became like pretty popular, which like really surprised me.
That's awesome.
People were like asking me to like do shows or like when you like come into like
That's
fucking
great.
Belgium or whatever. And I'm just like, dude, I'm like a sophomore in high school, and like I don't know. That was like really
That's
fun though.
awesome.
But I also feel like I got like a lot of shit. Like I feel like there was also like a camp of other musicians, even people I was close with, that kind of like thought that it was just like really stupid and like amateur-y, and just I don't know. It's just like kind of a
Yeah.
different
They didn't get
vibe.
it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. They just didn't get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So that was your foray into um I guess maybe more sound design, doing chiptune stuff and tracker workflow, huh?
Yeah, definitely more experimental stuff with me, and not just like playing an instrument, but like yeah,
Right.
this idea of like sequencing stuff and like what an arpeggiator is and what you can actually do with sound. But I made like a few albums on LSDJ, and then I think I somewhere along the way I became like really self-conscious of it. And it
Mm.
might have just like, I don't know, when you're a kid it's like
You're like,
stuff
maybe
like that
this
can
is
like
dumb.
yeah, it's like it like affects you, and so I just like kind of stopped doing that, and I took a break from music for like quite a while. I was just like,
Yeah.
whatever, like it's not gonna like go anywhere, like this isn't for me or like whatever, especially because like I was around so many people that were like performing and like playing shows, and they would like
Right.
actually come out with like legitimate albums that were like perfectly mastered, and like it sounded so good, and like I felt like I couldn't like compete, or that I was like irrelevant, or
Yeah. If
no
I
one
can't make
really.
that kind of stuff, then why do music at all?
Right, like I felt just sort of like irrelevant compared to like my other friends, and I didn't feel
Yeah.
like what I was doing was just like a serious mode of like music making or whatever. So yeah, I stopped for a while, and then only just like maybe 4 years ago got like back into it.
And this your first weekly beats you did?
It is, yeah. It's yours too, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. Congrats
Yeah,
to you as well.
I actually think I missed the first week.
I saw that, but I wasn't gonna talk any shit
Yeah,
about
I know.
it.
It sucks, man. There could have been just like one more song.
Could have been a perfect streak, man.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you heard about weekly beats from the Discord, right?
Yeah, from the M8 community.
Yeah, yeah. What made you want to jump on it this year?
I think I realized that was like sort of the thing I really needed, just to make it feel like music is actually this like consistent, beautiful, really important thing in my life. Because before Weekly Beats, like I was still making stuff on the M8 and like had some synth and like just like trying to like make some songs and like making songs, but like not really doing much with them or
Right.
whatever. And I was always doing that, like every night or like every other night or whatever, just kind of going around making it like a nice ritual to sit down at my table and like mess around with some sounds. And then when I heard about Weekly Beats, I was like, this is gonna be like is like perfect. Like I'm just gonna do kind of what I've been doing, except it's gonna frame like how I approach it in terms of like actually just like finishing something. And I
Yeah.
think it's gonna help me learn so much. And I'm really excited to hear just like, because yeah, I'm like, who are these people like that are participating in this thing? Like, what is their music gonna sound like? And
Yeah.
it was like so cool and inspiring, just like hearing everyone's different approach to music.
Oh yeah. I mean, it didn't take long for me to fall in love with the community and just what everyone is putting out, because there're just so many different styles, from chip tune to like hardcore metal, everything in between, techno, a lot of music that I didn't personally, listen to on my own, but week after week, I'm listening to all these different genres.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a really good point to bring up too, of like, because of the variety, I feel like it also makes the playlist actually like way more engaging and kind of fun to listen to. Cause there's
Hmm.
always like, yeah, it's like there's this heavy EDM track and then it goes right into this ambient track and then it goes right into just like singer songwriter type stuff. And
Or shanty tunes.
yeah, totally. um, yeah, just it kept things really like nice and interesting. And there was also, yeah, some of the other stuff that like I would never really listen to on my own. I actually like really loved, and I was like, oh man, like maybe I should listen to more of this. Like it's such a nice break from like listening to maybe some of the more like heavily processed things that I'm used to listening to.
Yeah, like people throughout the year, are like, what artists are you listening to this year? And I'm like, I listen to weekly beats. Like I don't have time to listen to
Yeah.
anything else.
Like, have you heard of this guy Jegasis?
Yeah, yeah. How about that Ranjit? He's
Yeah.
yeah. So it's been really cool to just be exposed to everyone kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and like just like reading about people's lives too. Like think
Yeah.
I think it brought up Jegasis too because I just like loved like just reading all of his like little blurbs he had
Oh
for
yeah.
that week. It's just like really playful and creative, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, for me it definitely feels like a music journal,
Yeah.
because it's like you make a song every week and you can go back and listen and be like, I kind of remember like what was going on that week,
Yeah.
or what the weather was like, or other things happening in life, which is, I feel like music is a really good, um I guess, time transporter for us anyway. Like you hear a song and you kind of remember the first time you heard it. But when
Yeah.
you're working on something for like an entire week, um, it really kind of blocks that moment in time off.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, like that's an interesting point when thinking about like approaches to music of like using lyrics as a way to process the week or even like the mood of the music. Um, yeah, and I think like if I listened back to like some of my tracks and weekly beats, I definitely could not tell you like what my mood was or like what happened that
Hmm.
week. I don't know. Time for me now is just feels kind of like a blur. Like these like temporal bookmarks that people have, I feel like mine are just kind of really really thin right now, and
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to think back on like, wait, what was I like thinking about, or like what was going on that week that like why did I make this.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way. I can tell you probably more about um what I the things that I was trying and experimenting with, and like how I assembled them to finally, come out and make a real song.
Yes, absolutely. It's like, yeah, I think for maybe like approaches like yours or mine, it's a lot about like the playing around, experimentation, like what kind of got you excited about making in the process that week, as opposed to like, like this thing happened and then I had this melody in my head and then I like made this thing. I was just kind of like, I was like wanting to like dick around on the hydrosynth and then came up with this cool plucky sound and like loved that sound.
Yeah, 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 and I think that was a like a hump I had to get over as well, because there was definitely some weeks where I was just like feeling that, not, I don't want to say burnout, but sort of like approaching dread of like, oh, this song is not working. Like I am failing this week. I really have to pull myself together to figure this out. And I realized that like every time I went in just to experiment and play around and then start arranging, like boom, a song is born.
Yeah.
So what kind of things have you learned over weekly beats that you want to carry forward? Like whether it's process or mindset or
Oh,
something
that
that you're like, wow, this was really worth it. That this thing is going to last forever.
that's a good question. Um, I learned a lot. Just I mean, in terms of doing stuff with the M8, or like I feel like after weekly beats, I've just gotten so much quicker at like being able to execute what I want.
Yeah.
Um, I've gotten like more familiar with the Hydrosynth through playing around with it. Yeah, like I've gotten more familiar with like all my gear, which is like a beautiful sort of reward in itself when like you start to feel like a kinship with like these musical
Mm-hmm.
tools in front of you. Um, so it's like, but there's still like, there's so much more to them than I'm doing with them too. So like maybe for like this next year, I want to try to be a little bit more experimental with
Yeah.
some of the gear and just kind of like learn more about it. Um, I also maybe like thinking about what I made for weekly beats. Um, a lot of it to me, like I was like, oh, okay, there's definitely sort of like a distinct beat, or like I realized like I'm really fond of these kinds of tempos,
Mm-hmm.
or like these chords or whatever. Um, so part of me wants to like lean into that, and then another part of me wants to go as far away as I can
Yeah.
from that and
I
just
feel that.
try something else, because it's like, all right, I have at least this amount of experience making this type of music under my belt. Like, let's just try something else, because that's how you're actually gonna start to know your gear more and like think about, I don't know, what you're listening to in like a different way.
Yeah, because it's like I think the worst case scenario for me is getting stuck in some sort of rut where I'm just like making the same stuff every time.
Yeah, for sure. The repetitiveness too, um, can be like an inspiration killer for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, there was like when you were talking about, like things just like not hitting that week, and you're just like, I'm a failure or something, like I totally felt that like many, many times.
Time is
Um,
running out.
yeah. But then, yeah, I think it was great just to have a deadline and just be like, okay,
Yeah.
just do something and like get it out there. And sometimes through that frantic moment, like you can surprise yourself, which I
Oh
think
yeah.
the deadline is a really great motivator. So I might give myself just some hard deadlines, but nothing like weekly beats. For me, it like started towards the end of the year, especially. It started to become kind of like a little bit more stressful than I think it needed to be for me.
Yeah. But having some sort of like, okay, I want to make a song a month and like just finish it and push it over the edge is a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think on the Weekly Beats Discord, someone posted like there's a
Yeah,
monthly
there's a
beats.
streak going on.
Yeah, which I think is cool. I think that's another huge part about Weekly Beats is just like the community aspect of to it, and like knowing that everyone else is like doing the same thing and is like trying to meet the same deadline, and then getting to see the huge playlist of music that's there, was really cool and like kept me motivated, to just like keep doing it. If I was just like doing this, into the void, it wouldn't feel as rewarding, and I probably wouldn't stick with it.
Yeah, and I mean I think that's why I wanted to do it is because I was making songs and releasing them, but it's to the void. And there's only so many friends that you can hit up and be like, "Hey, I released a new song. You want to listen to it?" But you've got an instant community of people that will gladly listen to your music every week.
Yeah, I think too, for me, there's sort of a anonymity behind it that I enjoy, and I've kind of always enjoyed when it comes to
Yeah.
music, because like, yeah, nowadays, like, just being able to upload anything online, like it's completely anonymous. And I don't think I'm really hesitant to show anyone that I personally know like my music. And I don't really know what that is, but something about like sharing music with just like random people online.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like maybe it's some kind of weird like validation thing where it's like this stranger on the internet's validation. Like them saying cool track is like more meaningful to me than like, one of my best friends saying cool track or whatever. Like, I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, that goes back to your like when you were vulnerable and showed people your chiptune music they were making, and they were like, "That
Uh,
sucks, bro." Um,
no, you're totally right, man. It still runs deep in my soul.
well, and there's this kind of beauty of internet anonymity that like you don't have to fit in any sort of boxes like no one's going to be offended that you're not making saxophone music anymore. Like
I wish there was one person though in the world who was like, man, he should have never
you
stopped
should have kept
playing.
with it.
I actually do kind of miss play the saxophone sometimes, and like I don't have one, like, but my saxophone's at my parents' house. But yeah, I want to try maybe this next year thinking about instrument, like not like analog instruments, like
Yeah.
flutes and weird shit like that. Like I want to buy a pan flute or something you can't see,
Yeah,
you know?
like another thing to sample.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, there's like so many crazy instruments out there in the world.
Well, do you have a bass? Because I listening through your stuff, I was like, God, your bass sounds so good.
Oh, thanks, dude. That's the M8.
That's the M8?
Yeah, at least I
Oh
think
my
for like
God.
for a lot of them, it's just like getting the pitch decay and the cutoff decay just right to make
All
it
right.
feel like a chugging, like don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
I
mean,
love
I
that.
pictured you recording a bass into, like resampling it or something.
Oh
So,
no, I have always like wanted to learn how to play bass. That's funny you mentioned that too, because I feel like every time you've commented on like one of my tracks, it's always like that bass line, dude.
oh, it's true. I don't know. Like your musical past definitely shines through with just like the phrasing and just how you write your bass lines that really just kind of carry things.
Oh, thanks, man. I think a huge part of like my like baseline inspiration, like from what I can think of right now, is like Tame Impala.
Oh
Like
yeah,
his
yeah, yeah.
bass lines are just they feel so like timeless, and yeah, there's just like something about them that just like
Kevin
hits
Parker's
just
a
right.
wizard.
Yeah. Do you play bass?
I do not. I also kind of took a long break from music, and I still play guitar, but it, I kind of just I to go back to what we were talking about a minute ago. I feel like every time I pick up a guitar, I play like the same stuff all the time,
Yeah.
uh, and I'm a little rusty at it. So I've just kind of enjoyed, messing around on keys and sequencing stuff. But haven't really gotten back into like making music with guitar, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Is it like acoustic or electric?
I have both.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
I
I have a
played
good.
guitar for a long time, so
Do you have a ukulele?
I do not. I
Okay.
do
I
not.
have a little ukulele. I also have a guitar, but like I have no fucking idea how to play that thing. Like when I see people playing guitar, I always get so jealous because I'm like, this instrument is so sick, and I've tried learning it, and I just cannot. I just can't. I don't know. Like I know it takes practice, and maybe I just like quit too early, but I
Definitely
know.
takes a lot of practice.
Yeah,
But I mean,
sometimes though.
you found a guitar in one of your tracks along the way and started adding some little licks and stuff in, which sounded great.
Yeah, like the one I had, I just like kept it in the basement where I'm living because I was just like, I'm never gonna play this thing. And then me and my partner were cleaning out the basement, and I saw the guitar and was like, oh, maybe like this could be some good inspiration for a track this week. And
Yeah.
so I don't really like know any chords, and so I'll just put my fingers on some random frets and see like what sounds good. It's like sometimes like I'm just like, oh, okay, I like that, and so like
Yeah,
I'll
that's good.
sample that thing, and yeah, who knows?
Yeah, well, it's working. It's working.
Cool.
Well, let's get into the music. Let's see here. One of your picks we'll get started with is Lemon Style. All right, let me cue it up. All right, that was Lemon Style. So right from the start, I love the sample loop. Where did you get that sample? Do you recall?
Oh, dude, my sample library is it is a complete disaster, let me tell you. And I am scared to try to
To
like
organize it.
organize my
Yeah,
stuff because
I
it's
get
really
that.
daunting. And
I get that.
plus, it's like there's some projects on the M8 where it's like I know if I change the name of this directory or whatever, like it's won't be able to play the song as like how it
Right.
was. And I
Right.
know you can like bundle things, but it's like I've got so much stuff on there, like
Yeah.
I do not want to do that, so I'm just going to keep it in
No,
like this cluster
I'm
of
terrified to
chaos.
move samples on my M8.
Yeah, but I honestly, like, I'll just Google like free samples and like I know like
Nice.
Cymatics has like a bunch of like really cool ones. Like I hear people talking about Splice a lot, but I've never used Splice.
I haven't
And then
either.
sometimes I'll just go on like YouTube and just type in like electric piano sound, or
Yeah.
sometimes like I notice myself, like when we were talking about gear earlier, like I love just like watching people like talk about gear, like the bad gear
Oh yeah,
episodes. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and those are really fun for me to watch. And even like watching tutorials on like gear I don't have to like see how it's being used. um and
I'm
so
right there with
sometimes,
you.
yeah, sometimes I'll
I'm
just
like, do
like,
I need a hydrosynth?
yeah, you do though. Like you really do.
So what
Sometimes
is
I'll
it
just,
about Lemon Style that made your top three?
I think that was my first submission for the weekly beats. It was week 2 though. So yeah, going back to
Oh,
like
right,
missing week
right.
1 is a huge bummer. But I think that one, like I like that one because it goes through so many different like evolutions.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like trying to do that in my songs where it's like I don't really want it to feel too stagnant, but it's like I like trying to have some kind of, at least a feeling of a narrative behind it or something. Like, oh, it's like high energy. Now it becomes really like spacious and relaxing. And now it becomes like maybe a little bit more
Yeah.
moody. And then it like calls back to like the heaviness. And it's all just sort of, I guess, like basic song structure stuff. But I think for like a sequencing workflow, it can also get really easy just to stay in a loop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the cool thing about the M8 is like, I don't know, for me, it does something more like visually and tactilely than like a traditional DAW, where it sort of forces me to like, all right, I have to change it up right here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, when I listen to your songs, I'm always amazed at the variation of transitions that you do and how you kind of break it up from scene to scene, like dropping out the drums a little bit or changing the phrasing slightly on like a chord stab right before it goes into something different, like you said, kind of like a different scene.
Yeah.
So you
I think
definitely
that
keep it interesting.
the M8 too is like such a great tool for doing those little changes too, to like keep things fresh. And
Mm-hmm.
like I love just being able to like deep clone something, change this phrase, um, just a little
Yeah.
bit. And also like I'll go into like the phrase mode and just like I'll select everything and then just like move it down like 2 notches, and then like select half of that and then move that down
Oh,
too.
cool.
So it makes it like really easy just to like quickly rearrange stuff in a single phrase, and then it totally can change like the feeling of it, or like provide a little bit more interest so it doesn't feel too stagnant.
And it is very visual.
Yeah.
Like, um, when I get towards the end of making a song on the M8, I will listen to it with my eyes closed so that I'm not focusing on where it's being sequenced, because I
Yeah.
feel like working on it, the visual component, like I know that a change is coming up, but it's different when I'm just like listening to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like how does it feel more than
Right.
like I think too that's why I'm so kind of hesitant to dive into like a DAW workflow. I just don't
I just
there's
hate making music on a computer.
Yeah, dude. And I think too, I was like thinking about it today. Like, I don't really like mouse navigation. Like, I love buttons. I love pressing buttons.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
I don't like having to move around this mouse, and like there's something just way more immediate.
The M8's so fast.
M8. Yeah, I wish the M8 had like.
I'm sorry, everyone. We're huge
pads.
M8 fanboys.
Like if the M8's pads were like the size of pillows and like you just had like a massive screen, that would be like incredible. Just being able to like, like whack-a-mole these huge like keypads to navigate.
Version 3. Well, cool. We'll keep it going with Flora, and this one is week 23. Here we go.
Every shift of every minute of the day in the lighting or the sun goes behind a cloud and presents you with a computational problem greater than doing the General Motors payroll for 10 years. See, flowering plants, there is reason this man has the ecology.
right. So what about that one made your top 3?
Um, I also think it like the change that happens is pretty. I think it's beautiful. Like there's a contrast between this like the first half, which feels very dance floor EDM,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's like the second half, which still feels dancey, but it feels like you're in a different environment. And I think that like it might have been the first song I used like a Terrence McKenna sample for the weekly beats. And I can't really remember how I started like listening to him again, but I just started listening to him again and was like, I love this guy. Like this guy is incredible.
He's in my next song.
Yeah, and I know like there's producers like Ott who will use like Terrence McKenna samples or like Alan Watts samples, and I still do now, but like used to be really into like Sybian or like Psy dub music, and Ott was huge inspiration. Like I love this kind of like reggae electronic dubby kind of music. It's like such a cool groove. So part of me was like, you know, trying to create maybe like a similar feeling, maybe like a little more upbeat.
Yeah, it's like really cool percussion stuff going on.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So there's like a free like Indian percussion sample pack that I love using. Yeah, it works so well. Like I love how organic.
Yeah, like some hand drums and shakers and
yeah. So like again, kind of back to the like whole like analog thing, like loving the sound of like analog stuff. Like I don't want to have to program a snare sound. You know, it's just like there's this thing that's already out there that sounds like way cooler to me, and so I'm gonna like try to use that, and it just gives the whole atmosphere like such a different feeling, you know, depending on even just the type of percussion that you're using.
Yeah, Murder Cat turned me on to the that jazz drum sample kit, and I'm like in love with it.
Oh, sweet! Is it's all like jazz? Like what kind of stuff's going on in there?
Well, I think it's the only drum sample pack I have that has toms for whatever reason. So it's like, sweet, I can do fills. But it's got you know, a bunch of different variations of hits, and there's even like toms with snare on and off, you know, so you like when the snare's on, you get that little rattle in the background when you know, like a real drum kit.
Yeah. And there's so much subtlety to just like analog sounds that you like, it's going to take you so long to try to recreate that.
No, but I am trying to figure that out on this Digitone 2 that does not have sampling.
That's
but
right.
I think it's kind of interesting.
I'm psyched for you. It's funny because I was like recently been watching a lot of videos on the Digitact too, and I was like, should I do this? I don't know if I want to get into the Electron box yet or ever. I'm not sure. So I'm excited for you.
It's been fun so far, and not as bad as, you know, I thought the Electron sequencing, you know, people kind of made it out like it's just a real bear. I mean, I think some of their machines are a pain, but you know,
I feel like going from the M8 though, or like not that you're like making a full switch, but like there's going to be a nice. I feel like there's just going to be maybe more of a tactile experience.
Yeah, there's more knobs. There's like, you know, it's a little bit different in a good way, and 16 tracks.
Yeah, that is crazy.
That's a lot of tracks.
There's so many tracks.
Oh, and also on Flora, I really like the last 45 seconds. There's these like kind of glitched out strings that I think are awesome.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, again, I could not tell you where any where I get my samples from, like exactly. I just know like I just have vague memories of me like Googling stuff and
you're
then
just searching for anything.
Yeah. Like that's what's cool too about sampling is just like anything. It's like there's just like so much stuff out there.
There is. All right, the last of your 3 picks, and then we'll move on to mine, is Heatwave. Here we go. That was Heatwave. Tell me about it.
It's a lot of chops in that one.
There's a lot of chops.
Yeah, I think I do remember making that one and just getting so into like the little micro hist of sound that I could get from a sample and just playing with all the arrangement of that. I think too earlier that week was when I first got these like African vocals and Indian vocal sample packs, and
Got it.
I was like really excited to just use them and see what I could do with them.
Yeah, because this is week 25, so almost halfway.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of chops. M8's great at chops. If you're not chopping on the M8,
I need to watch some of your YouTube videos and go to chop school, because I don't feel like I'm like really doing the best I can.
it is very tedious. And so like sometimes I hate myself when like I'm doing it. I'm just like this, like it can get for such like a like one phrase, you know, and it's
Yeah.
like that's like not even maybe a second of music. It's like if you're making like stop motion animation or something.
Exactly.
And it's
That's a
just
good
frame
analogy.
by frame, and you're just like, wow, I spent 10 hours on this, and it's just like 5 seconds of like animation happening.
Do you do the double speed trick so you get more?
Oh, like with the groove?
Yeah. Oh, not the groove. I know some people do, like if you're doing a 110 tempo, they'll actually set the tempo to 220, and then they have, instead of 6 ticks, they've got 12 essentially.
I've never changed the tempo, but I have changed the groove, where I think if you just half time the groove, so instead of it being like 6/6, it's 3/3, it'll kind of maybe give you the same effect where a 16th note will become a 32nd note.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah. Cool.
But then it becomes like, yeah, because if you change the groove, then it's like that carries on into the next phrase, and you just have to make sure.
Yeah.
And there have been so many times when I have gotten like lost and just like, why isn't the playhead moving down here, you know?
All right, well, we'll move on to my picks. So I definitely had some trouble making my picks, but let's go with brevity. So I love that one because it is very Tame Impala, washed out, like just chill. What is the main chord? What'd you use to get that?
I think that was a Logic synth as
Okay.
well. Yeah, I think that song, I had like an initial sketch of it on the M8, and then I think I like maybe decided it would just be easier to try to like do Logic. I think I like recently just purchased
Yeah,
Logic too.
that's what I was reading, that you were I guess not impressed with GarageBand, and it's like which I still do everything on GarageBand.
Hey, no, GarageBand is amazing for the record.
This podcast is produced by GarageBand.
Yeah.
But you know, it does lack side chaining and some fun stuff like that. But I think this is also one of your first vocal songs, right? These aren't just random vocals from the internet. That's you, right?
Yeah, that's me. And like I think working with Logic too, and thinking about maybe wanting to sort of collect maybe more high quality samples, I picked up a microphone. And yeah, it's like I've never had a microphone. And so I was like, oh sweet,
Wow.
this is gonna open up a whole world of possibilities. And like I don't really use it as much as I should now, but I think that week is like I just wanted to like try to mess with like some of the new stuff that I recently acquired.
Well, and that bass is M8.
I you know
Okay, all right.
I could not tell.
Well, it sounds great.
It's either M8s or Logic, but I actually have the file up here on the M8, but
and the like the synth melody that's like halfway through, I love.
Oh, thanks. So yeah, the M8 bass it's not the bass you're listening to. What I have on the M8 is just like a really basic like sawtooth, just to get like the rhythm and the notes.
The demo.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think your vocals are great, and whatever you did in Logic, they sit in the mix great. So I wanted to tell you, you should do more vocals.
Oh, thanks, dude. I appreciate that. I actually,
like, it sounds amazing.
I just like looked up on YouTube, like how does Tame Impala like do vocals?
All right.
Then just like, I just like followed that and then just like made some adjustments to what I think might like sound good in the context of the song. But I was like, oh, I could like double vocals, and like I had already knew about that stuff in the past. But then like adding, subtle bits of like delay and reverb, maybe like a little bit of chorus. And I think a lot of it too is just about like the timing of the layering of the vocals.
Mm-hmm.
Cause I feel like when I've tried to do something similar to that in the past, it didn't sound like as good. And it might have just been because like I was sort of maybe too loose with the timing of like the doubling. And it's like, if you get that locked in just right, like it can sound like really magical.
Yeah. And the times that I've done vocals have not been this dreamy. And I think they just sit too far forward and you're like, I don't really like that. But this feels like it could almost be another synth.
Yeah. So I like a great musical group that I think does that really well is this band called Sound of Series. And I think it's two people, but her vocals are like so dreamy and airy, and it just pulls you into a completely other dimension when you're listening to it. And I love that analogy of how it could just be another synthesizer,
Yeah, because it's not like the words really matter.
Yeah, it's like the feeling of the sound.
Yeah. Well, keep it up, man, because those vocals sound great.
Thanks.
All right, the next one is Forgetting. So that one is just a groove. Like it's going for a while, and then that little synth line comes in, and then another amazing transition, and then that little guitar lick and those like deep vocal chops, like chef's kiss.
Oh, thanks, dude. Yeah, that one. So that electric piano that comes in, I sampled that. Well, like I played that on the on my MIDI controller, but using the electric piano in Logic, and so I have that, like the audio from my computer feeding into the SP404, so I could just like do the skip back and then like capture what I played.
Yeah.
And then I could just sample that into the M8, which is, I thought, has been like a really good workflow for me.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it's so funny too, like just like making music, and then like only like people really only listen to the finished product, and they don't see like the countless hours you spend just trying to come up with like some kind of riff or something that like feels good. Cause it's like, I remember just like playing so many like different things until I like landed on something that just sounded just right for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. No one hears all the failed attempts, or like I just can't get these two parts to like play nicely with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I always wonder, it's like, what does my music sound like to people? Like to people that, to like, you know, anyone else that isn't me? Cause it's like, when you hear your own music, all you can really focus on is just like how you made it, or like maybe what you
Right.
changed, like all the little things. And it's just like, what is someone else's experience like of this thing right now?
Well, over here, it's great. So
Oh, thanks.
Well, cool. This brings us to my final pick. I had to throw away like 3 other ones because I just couldn't decide. These are in no particular order, by the way. I couldn't have the added stress of picking a top one. But this one is Aurum, which is a very recent one, week 50. I was also kind of curious. All of your picks were from like the first half of the year.
Yeah.
Did you not like any of your music after the first half of the year?
I tried to also pick stuff I thought was a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
Because I think some of the later stuff gets into like the 6-7 minute range.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, and I remember like listening back to one song too, and I was just like, man, this could have stopped at like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's like I wanted to also just pick stuff, I guess, thinking about the format of like
right.
the
Okay.
podcast too. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely feel that anytime I make something over 4 minutes, I'm like, could I have chopped out some of these repeats?
Yeah.
Does it help the song? Or yeah, I'm always self-conscious about how long the song is. But I read something recently that, songs in the 90s were like 6 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
Just way longer averages for songs because no one had cell phones. We were just like kicking it at the bus stop.
Yeah, totally. It's like attention spans now are dwindling, and so
even my own.
Yeah, just make a 2-minute banger, and you're good. You're set.
So the final one is Aurum, Aurum, and we'll talk about this one and play out the end of the podcast. So my notes I wrote about this one, there's like some cool bell sounds in the background, and then a really cool transition with a really cool guitar melody. And I even wrote a note, sick bass line.
Of course.
Which seems to be a trend. And then there's some more like low pitched samples And my final note was, it's a jam. So I don't know if you remember this one, but you're about to. Cool. We'll play it out. Thanks for being on the show, man. And we'll see you out there on the Discord.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. It's great talking to you. And I'm looking forward to like hearing more of this podcast series that you're doing. It's going to be really
awesome.
Fun.
Yeah. Thanks again. All right, here we go. Aurum.